واحدا.
Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik alayhi wa ala alih. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a refreshing break. Just in time for us to dive deep into a new topic, that of the Islamic gift economy. And so this is a new concept probably for many of us. It was for me as well when I first heard of it. And so just by way of introduction, after discussing with our instructor, Sidi Rhamis Kent, I'll read a few excerpts from Dr. Adi Setia's introduction to his translation of Kitab Adab Al-Kasbi wal-Ma'ash. So the book that we're reading of Imam Ghazali, Dr. Setia writes in his introduction, in conclusion, over the course of the past few years, I have come to notice in my many discussions and interactions with fiqh scholars, business professionals, ordinary merchants and traders, as well as with students and all those concerned about economic, financial, and commercial matters, that the standard fiqh manuals, and he mentions one of them, is not really adequate for reviving classical mu'amala in the current age if the reader, student, or even scholar fails to attain to or be truly aware and cognizant of the underlying meta-economic or meta-legal vision in which the formal fiqh of mu'amala finds its substantive meaning, direction, and purpose. So a lot of words there, but really what he's saying is the current state, if you just try to derive the ethos, the principles, from only the fiqh, you might fall short if you don't understand sort of the meta vision, the meta ethos that is applied here. Reading the classical Kasb texts have led me to call this meta-legal or meta-fiqh vision of the Islamic gift economy. So this is his new nomenclature, a new terminology. Al-Iqtisad al-Ihsani, or common good economics, Al-Iqtisad al-Maslahi, as a dialectical framework to allow those texts, the ones he just referenced, to engage creatively and evaluatively with current economic concerns. In the light of this vision, I suggest that we redefine the science of economics as the science of earning and provisioning of livelihoods, al-ma'ayish, for the economic good, in Arabic, ilm al-iktisab wal-infaq, and thereby do away for good with the still current secular, materialistic, and nihilistic obsession with and addiction to dogmatic, cognitively vacuous notions of scarcity and wants that have been so hegemonic over the way most experts, policymakers, and indeed Muslim economists, including those in Islamic banking and finance, think about economics and the economy. And so he goes on to discuss other matters such as the etymology of the word economics that Sheikh Yahya mentioned yesterday, and how any system that then applies economics in the macro sense and then you find destructive outcomes can in no way be Islamic, in quotes. And so what we'll leave that there, and we'll leave the rest to Sidi Rhamis, inshallah, to expound upon the meanings that were just mentioned in these two paragraphs and how we can carry forth these meanings, inshallah, into a practical lived reality, first in our lives as individuals and as families, and over the coming months, years, decades, lifetimes, into our communities and the broader society. So with that, I hand it over to Sidi Rhamis. Bismillah.
There we go. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammadin al-Fatihi lima aghlaq wal khatimi lima sabaq nasir haqq bil haqq wal hadi illa siratal mustaqima. Wa sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi haqqa qadri miqdar al-azim. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ونبيك ورسولك النبي العلمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد خير الناس وعلى سيدنا إلياس وعلى سيدنا خضر بن العباس وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يا حي قيوم صل على حبيبك سيدنا محمد وأغثني به وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. عدد خلقك ورضا نفسك وزنة عرشك ومداد كلماتك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of the retreat for inviting me to speak about this topic, which I think is a very important one. And I think, as had been mentioned in the opening remarks, I think one of the first things that has to be discussed here is the cognitive frame, or what I could also call the conceptual habitat within which this discussion of economy is taking place. Because there is a worldview that comes out of the Islamic tradition that first needs to be understood if any of the fiqh, as was just mentioned, is to make any sense. And as Dr. Adi likes to say, it's like talking about the nature of a lion that lives in a zoo as opposed to a lion that lives in the jungle. These are entirely different things because the context are different. So we first have to understand the context, right, that this discussion about economy, about mu'amala, needs to take place within. Because the problem is if we talk about mu'amala, it's just like a type of Islamic consumerism, right, or Islamic, again, banking and finance. There's a certain set of assumptions that simply don't make any sense as it pertains to what we understand and what we know about the Islamic tradition, right? So we have to talk about things like, to get a little academic, we have to talk about cosmology, cosmogony. We have to talk about epistemology, ontology, teleology, axiology, soteriology, eschatology. We have to talk about all of these things because there's an entire way in which we understand the nature of reality that first has to be discussed and established before any of these things as it pertains to economics is to make any kind of sense. Okay, so I want to start with a piece that Dr. Adi wrote called The Golden Mean and the Golden Rule, Iqtisad, Livelihoods, and the Economics of Purpose. And so I want to use this first session to hopefully take some time to set up this cognitive frame. And then we can get into this discussion about what we call the Islamic gift economy. And also an extension of that, something that Dr. Eddie and I have collaborated in creating called the IGE Pearl, the Islamic Gift Economy Program for Ethical, Appropriate, and Regenerative Livelihoods. And so it's sort of like a vehicle to basically take all of the ideas and the concepts that are talked about in IGE and actually make them, again, practical. Right? Okay, so starting from a section in the piece called What is the Economy? Right, just to lay down a groundwork. So the word economy is of Greek provenance, right? Oikonomia, from which we also derive the term economics as the study of the economy. It originally means household management, or in Arabic, tadbir al-manzil, or the management of the family homestead, habitation, or settlement. Thus, economics is seen as distinct from ethics, which is really about the management of the self, or ilm al-akhlaq, tadbir al-shakhs, or tadbir al-nafs, and politics, which is the management of the city, or siyasa, or tadbir al-madina. But in practice, these three fields of study overlap greatly. So at each level, we're talking about the primary concern being, how do we manage this thing? First and foremost, how do we manage ourselves, right? And so ethics, or ethos, really is the science of morals. And everything else that follows is simply an application of this science of morals, right, at ever larger scales. I often like to think of this as like a fractal, right? A fractal is just a pattern that repeats, right, regardless of the size and the scale. It's the same thing, right? So this is really like a type of ethical fractal, right, applied at these different scales. Together, these three fields of traditional philosophical inquiry, ethics, economics, and politics constitute practical wisdom, or hikmat amaliyah. Their formal distinctions notwithstanding, they have overlapping moral concerns due to the fact that they are all concerned about the question of virtuous ethical comportment in relation to oneself and to others in the context of communal and societal life. So in household management or stewardship, the overriding concern of the head or steward of the household is the prudent, judicious management or stewardship of the resources, income, and expenditure of the household, so as to provide for the needs of all its members and dependents, humans and non-humans. In a typical household, or rather homestead or settlement, relatively more resources are allocated and devoted to the care and provision of the needs of the disabled and the weak, babies, children, the elderly, those with handicaps, et cetera, et cetera. While the less dependent and hence more independent members, the grown-ups and the able-bodied, are pretty much left to their own devices to fend for themselves and are expected to contribute their share of work or labor towards ensuring the overall livelihood and general well-being of the household. Now, the village, the city, or the country as a whole can be seen as an extended household in which the steward or caretaker, called the local, municipal, or national government or authority, is likewise expected to show similar care and concern for the weak. So, for example, the poor and the disadvantaged of the population, and to secure the common good, or the maslaha. Therefore, we have the economy extending from the level of the family, right, tadbir al-manzil, or the management of the settlement, to the level of the city or community, right, tadbir al-Madina, or the management of the city, community, or society, and even to the stewardship of the whole earth, right, the whole inhabited world, or oikonomeni in the Greek, as the macro household, right, the khilafat al-ard, right, the stewardship of the earth. Again, same pattern, right? You're applying the same ethics at different scales. From this deep social and ecological perspective, the formal sciences of economics and ecology, and moreover, since etymologically the two words share the same root, are essentially one science and one discipline, not two segregated fields of inquiry, forever at loggerheads with one another. such as we find today in the modern academia and in much of public policy. So again, if let's go back and again look at the point that he just made, that economics and ecology are related because they have linguistic roots etymologically. Ecology is the study of the household. Economy is, again, the management of the household. So in reality, you cannot have an economy that is divorced from ecology. And if you have an economy that's divorced from ecology, it doesn't make any sense. It isn't legitimate because it fails to recognize the reality of both of these phenomena. They are intimately, essentially linked. Therefore, there's no trade-off between economy and ecology, but rather economy must conform to ecology, and the science of ecology should be the basis and framework for the science of economy. And herein lies why the modern understanding of economics cannot be assumed to be legitimate, especially if you want to talk about this from the standpoint of Islam or an Islamic framework. It just simply doesn't make any sense. So now there's a section called On the Purposive Economy. So moreover, the fact of the matter is that economics, or iqtisad, right, the seeking or realization of what is judicious, in the Islamic understanding is the science of earning and provisioning, or ilm al-iqtisab wal-infaq. It is the study of how people, as individuals and as communities, earn their livelihoods by drawing upon the divine bounty in nature, right? Or fadl Allah fil ard. It therefore therefore follows that a healthy economy of life is dependent upon a healthy ecology and a healthy ecosystemic balance in symbiosis between culture and nature, a dynamic harmony of soil, soul, and society. Soil, soul, and society. Now, since economics is the science of household management, or rather the science of household stewardship, right, or khilafa, and the end of this stewardship is the overall well-being of the household, then any economic system that leads wittingly or unwittingly to the dissolution of the household or the dissolution of the Earth's biosphere as the macro household can only be an elaborate, nihilistic inversion of the true real meaning and purpose of economics as intellectual study and the economy as social reality. Such a reconceptualization of the true meaning of economy, economics, and the socio-economic domain of life can be gleaned from a close reading of classical Islamic texts on the meaning, function, and purpose of work. Enterprise, that's a work being amal. Enterprise, kasab, industry, sina'a, livelihood, ma'isha, vocation, minah, or hurfa, and commerce, tijara, and transactional exchange in general, mu'amala. For instance, Ibn Abi Dunya, author of the Restoration of Wealth, or Islah al-Mal, has devoted 3 whole chapters on qasid, right, which connotes being economical in relation to wealth, food, and clothing. Qasid in this particular context refers to the practical ethics of judiciousness, prudence, thriftiness, moderation, temperance, and frugality in the acquisition and disposal of wealth. From the root word qasid, we derive the Arabic term for economy, iqtisad, which gives us the meaning of the seeking out or realization of what is judicious and prudent. Another meaning for the term qasid is goal, aim, objective, direction, and purpose. And thus the term iqtisad has also the meaning of seeking out or realizing the purpose of something. The understanding here is that apart from the immediate worldly and pragmatic purpose of earning a livelihood, there is also a transcendent, ethical, and moral purpose grounded in both human nature, or fitra, and divine revelation, wahi. in anything that we do or seek in this temporal life. So by transcendent, it's meant that a worldly thing is not sought for its own sake, but in virtue of an ethical and moral, spiritual, and ultimately eschatological goal or imperative that transcends its immediate worldliness, temporality, materiality, instrumentality, and facility. The Ghazalian dictum, the temporal world of the temporal life of this world is the seedbed of the everlasting life of the hereafter, captures the essence of this transcendent purpose. So this phrase was mentioned a couple of times yesterday. And so this would, again, explain the significance or, again, what it's pointing to. So such an earning, seeking, or work is thereby right livelihood, or kasab tayyib, in which a worldly thing of facility, so for example, money, is sought not merely for its immediate economic utility, but also insofar as it serves and facilitates some deeper transpersonal purpose, which is well defined in the light of divine revelation, prophetic practice, and sound reason. Such a positively purposive seeking is prudent and judicious, since it preempts excess, waste, and injustice to oneself or others. It systematically relates means to ends and to the ultimate end. We know that too much of a good thing is bad, and hence the excessive, or israf, can be oppressive, right? Dhulm. When the original purpose for which a thing is sought is lost, overlooked, or exceeded. This is the paradox of the fact that when we acquire more and more of something, we find less and less meaningful use of it. Hence, the moral imperative of moderation, or tawassut, temperance, ifa, prudence, qasid, balance, mizan, magnanimity, ihsan, justice, adl, and an overall concern for the soul's salvation, or shafaqa. Because the end of any economic activity is well defined in the light of the guidance of both sound reason and true revelation, anything that exceeds, belies, or defeats that end will be considered dissipative, wasteful, and meaningless, even oppressive and sinful, and thereby ethically, morally, and even legally prescribed or forbidden. Hence, consumption, literally, the word consumption means to use up, to exhaust. Right? Hence, consumption, if we must use the term, cannot be for its own sake, but for provisioning oneself, or infaq, one's family and dependents, and by extension, the wider community through the recirculation and regeneration of surplus for the common good, so as to create that social and cultural environment promotive of personal and communal devotion to God. Hence, the end of consumption is provision. The end of consumption is provision. The purpose, the point of consuming is to provide, right? Not simply for the sake of consuming, right? To sort of satisfy some, again, selfish desire, right? The end of consumption is provision, both in the sense of provisioning for our own material and non-material needs in earthly life, and for our ultimate felicity, or sa'ada, in the afterlife. Hence, to be meaningful and fulfilling, consumption must be aligned to and guided by provision. Right? Consumption must be aligned to and guided by provision. Thus, Imam al-Ghazali says the worldly life is the seedbed of the afterlife. This is because every worldly deed, good or evil, however seemingly insignificant, has eschatological significance and hence consequences for everlasting salvation or perdition. Every moment in this life is bestowed to us as an opportunity to sow seeds of good or bad deeds, the harvest of which, sweet or bitter, is ultimately and everlastingly realized in the afterlife. Therefore, the economy is both material and moral, and the imperative of right action, or amal salih, is realized in the economy through right livelihood, right? Through kasb tayyib. Right. And again, in going through all of this, you should see by now why you cannot talk about Islamic economics within the context of modern, materialistically based Western economics. Because this isn't, has anybody ever, if anyone has ever taken an economy class, have you ever had a discussion like this in economics? So what does it mean to talk about Islamic banking and finance? Or talk about, these financial instruments that are often promoted, within those systems, if you haven't had this discussion as a foundational basis to talk about these things. So he continues, we may also cite Al-Muhasibi to further illustrate this clear sense of ethical and moral direction underlying and guiding the socio-economic domain of life in Islam, in which transient pragmatic utility is inseparably and intimately integrated into everlasting purpose. So this is the quote from Muhasibi. So he says, therefore, when you wish to go to your market, or do something for your livelihood, or take up a craft, or become an agent, or wakala, or engage in some other vocations in order to seek the licit and to imitate the practice of Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to seek recompense for yourself and your dependents, to earn provision for them, and in order to be independent of people, even while showing compassion to brethren and neighbors, and to pay the obligatory alms and discharge every obligatory right, then hold out hope through these efforts that you shall meet Allah, glorified and exalted be He, while your countenance is as the moon on the night when it is full. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's the goal in engaging in all of these activities, is to show up with your face alight, right? Like the moon, right? When the night is like the moon when night comes in, right? Such then is how we conceive of the eschatology of economics as Muslims, right? That's the goal, right? So you're not engaging these activities solely for its own sake. Right? You really know what the end of the matter is. So wealth is well-being. From qasid, we derive also the term maqasid. Right? From qasid, we derive also the term maqasid, right? Or maqsid, meaning objective. The preservation of wealth and property, or hifz al-mal, is among the injunctions of the Holy Quran and constitutes the fifth maqsid, or objective, of the 5 overarching objectives of the revealed law, or al-Sharia, right? Namely, preservation of religion, life, intellect, lineage, and wealth. The word for wealth is also ghina in Arabic, which means both wealth and independence, interestingly enough, right? Means both wealth and independence. Just as, in contrast, the word faqr means also poverty and dependence. As exemplified in the saying, wealth is part of health. Wealth as both ghina and mal is seen as an aspect of well-being or holistic health, or afia, but only if it is earned licitly and expended judiciously. Only if it is earned licitly, right, and spent judiciously. To provide for the needs of oneself, family members, dependents, so that they remain independent of people they avoid beggary, and thereby preserve their dignity, honor, self-worth, and self-respect, and thus their capacity for preserving and exercising their intellectual and moral agency, which is the essence of freedom and responsibility. Right? That and therein lies the reason why one would say pursue wealth. Is so that you effectively are able to preserve human dignity, and why you would also extend your hand in working or helping other people to enrich themselves so they can do the same. Right? So you win when other people win, because ultimately the project is to preserve the dignity of the human being. That's the project. And that's the reason why any of us would pursue any worldly wealth, is that ultimately we understand that this has otherworldly consequences. This socioeconomic autonomy or material independence is seen in turn to provide them with the wherewithal to help the poor in the community and to cultivate the peace of mind and emotional tranquility required for nurturing their intellect and their inner spiritual growth and purification. So wealth is here seen as an instrument for generating personal, communal, and spiritual well-being. Moreover, the rich are encouraged to reinvest their surplus wealth into uplifting the socioeconomic situation of the poor and needy in their communities. So the end of one being rich is to enrich the poor, while oneself practicing frugality in prosperity. Right? So you use your wealth, again, to enrich others while retaining enough. You need to maintain yourself. Like, you're not out here to floss for people, right? You're not here to impress people with what you have. I mean, we heard in the hadith yesterday for the Prophet ﷺ, where seeing the young man go out in the morning again to work, right? And then again, the people lamenting, his companions lamenting, oh, if this man was only going out in the way of Allah. And that he said, no, he's going out in the way of Allah, provided that he isn't earning either to accumulate or to show off. So it's a high station to earn, right? To take care of your dependents. It is a very high station. And I think this is something that unfortunately doesn't get the type of attention that it deserves as far as the importance of this particular activity in terms of its spiritual value, its spiritual worth, and what it earns for you, what it produces again in these sort of otherworldly respects. This reinvestment of surplus wealth into promoting the common good, or maslaha amma, is achieved through various structural means. And this is an extremely important section, because this really starts to speak about how are these things applied at a communal level? What are the instruments? What are the vehicles through which these concepts, these ideas, again, can be applied? So this reinvestment of surplus wealth into promoting the common good is achieved through various structural means, such as charity, right, sadaqah and zakat, endowments, awqaf, gift giving, hibba, and bequests, wasiyah. It is also achieved even more effectively through various forms of direct people-to-people and business-to-business funding and investment structures based on venture capital, or mudaraba, business partnership, musharaka, commissioned production, or salam, or istisna, work commissioning, ijara, or ja'ala, including the goodly interest-free monetary loan, or a qard hasan. Such direct investment into substantively serving the real productive economy of goods and services of the community through various contractual instruments of risk sharing and equity financing will facilitate a balanced circulation and recirculation of surplus wealth through all strata of society, so that all can live a dignified, productive life of both personal independence and communal interdependence, right? So it's not just one. It's not just we're able to stand alone and we don't need anybody else. There's always somebody, there's always something that you're able to benefit from that someone does better than you do, right? They're providing, again, some product or service that you're not able to provide yourself. And so by virtue of that, there is an interdependence that's fostered. Okay. Where did I leave off? So he says, again, so such direct investment into substantively serving the real productive economy of goods and services of the community through various contractual instruments of risk sharing and equity financing will facilitate a balanced circulation and recirculation of surplus wealth through all strata of society, so that all can live a dignified, productive life of both personal independence and communal interdependence, and of self-reliance and self-respect, thus preempting wealth from being something that is hoarded, monopolized, right, to circulate only amongst the affluent in society, so that it won't circulate merely among the rich in your midst. And that's a quote from another article he wrote, so inshallah we'll be able to pull that up too. Hence, one salient aspect of the realization of the purpose of the socio-economic life, or Al-Iqtisad, is the proper production, acquisition, preservation, and disposition of monetary and material wealth to provision for personal, familial, and communal well-being, right? So we go from wealth to well-being. Right? That's the purpose here. We want to use whatever different forms of capital we have in the community to create a condition to where everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, is made better for whatever it is that you're engaged in, whatever the activity is. I mean, and really, I think in this day and time, in this context, that's dawah. If you're able to extend concern to people in that manner, that speaks volumes. That's dawah. It's not about what we're speaking, what we're saying. It's about what we're doing. What are we doing for people? You can save the words. I want to see what you're doing. In such a circulative economy, the rich enriches the poor, so that they in turn might become rich, i.e. self-sufficient, and enrich others in a continuous, virtuous cycle of wealth generation, regeneration, and recirculation through the community across generations to ensure intergenerational prosperity and well-being. Now, the economy of right livelihood, articulated here, as it were, in the framework of philosophical, religious virtue ethics or practical wisdom, is obviously premised on the moral precepts of the golden rule, right? Justice, adl, and the golden mean, temperance, ifah, or ta'affuf. The golden rule, or commutative justice, in socioeconomic life is realized through engaging in fair, honest, virtuous transactions with people, just as one would expect similar ethical treatment from them. This is doing justice, adl or adala, to oneself and to people. The basis of this is, again, the phrase that's found in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, right? There is no harm, right? There's no inflicting of harm, right? Nor reciprocation for harm. That's justice. That is the ground floor. That should not be seen as anything special. That is the ground floor. If you can't do that, It's a problem. If you can't be in the world without harming people, there's a problem. Even if you think about the ways in which the Prophet ﷺ, and again in the hadith, define what a Muslim is, right? The Muslim is one from whom what? Right? People are safe from your hand and your tongue, right? That's ground floor. And then what's a mu'min? What's a believer? Right. He's the one from whom other people's lives and wealth are safe from them. He didn't mention anything about acts of worship. Notice that the way he defined what a Muslim and a mu'min is did not reference ritual acts of worship. This is about the mundane things, the mundane day-to-day worldly things and how you deal with people. The Muslim is one from whom other people are safe from their hand and your tongue, and the mu'min is one from whom other people's lives and wealth are safe from them. So think about the significance of that. The golden rule or commutative justice, again, so we just covered that, right? To do no harm. The golden mean is to practice the virtues of judiciousness, prudence, thriftiness, moderation, temperance, and frugality in the disposal of one's wealth in order to realize material and spiritual well-being. This is doing justice, or itidal, or iqtisad, to one's wealth, property, and money. The economy of life is thus an integrative economy of the golden mean and the golden rule. It is also called the economics of happiness, sa'ada, or virtuenomics. Right? So again, if we sort of, there are these phrases, there are these things that we constantly repeat. And I think if we stop to think about the significance of what we're saying and how it is to be applied, and especially in light of this discussion, I think you begin to see there's a very different way in which to understand the significance of those phrases, right? So again, if you take, again, the version of the golden rule in Islam, and I think it's very interesting that it's in the form of a conditional statement. None of you truly believes unless you wish for your brother or your sister what you wish for yourself. And how that's understood, again, if you reference explanations for what the hadith actually means, is that is not confined to your co-religionist. That is not only confined to people who believe the same as you. I was stopped by a couple of Mormons about a couple of weeks ago. I was walking my way back to my house in Oakland, and they were in the car and they stopped. I was coming back from carrying groceries. We ended up getting into a long discussion, and one of the things I said to them was I repeated that phrase, our sort of qualification for one's legitimacy in claiming belief. But I told him that. I said, none of you truly believe. So my belief in God, I told them, is contingent on my wanting good for you, even if you don't believe the same as me. And if we think about who the Prophet ﷺ was, and I think many of us forget, there was only one in the beginning. He was it. So imagine he had that attitude. None of you truly, like thinking that the only people he's concerned about are the people that believe the same as him. There was only one of him. Yani, what if he didn't extend this concern to people who were not, yani, did not hold the same views or beliefs as him? There would only be one. Right? So I told them, I said, I want good for you. And it is incumbent upon me, if my claim to belief is legitimate, I have to want good for you. So everything that's talked about here, I think is really significant in terms of expanding our understanding as to what we understand faith to be, constituted by. Right? So it's not just something that not a phrase that we just simply kind of reflexively repeat. What does it mean in terms of the actual practice? in terms of how does it inform the way we are in the world, and how we behave and how we treat people, and what we do for them or don't do for them. How does it guide or direct the way we are in the world? So, defining the purposive economy. In the light of the aforementioned rigorous considerations, we have thus defined this purposive economy, which we call the Islamic gift economy, as the provisioning and sharing by mutual giving and receiving through fair social and commercial exchange of natural and cultural abundance for realizing material and spiritual well-being. And I'll repeat that, right? The purposive economy, which we call the Islamic gift economy, the IGE, is the provisioning, we define it as the provisioning and sharing by mutual giving and receiving through fair social and commercial exchange of natural and cultural abundance for realizing material and spiritual well-being. This is, in a very real sense, wanting for you what I want for me. Right? I'm taken care of if you are taken care of. That's the MO. That's the understanding. That I have an enlightened self-interest. I have an enlightened self-interest in being concerned about your well-being. Because I believe that if you are doing well, ultimately I will do well. And this is extended to everyone and everything. And if you really think about what is at the heart of the Sunnah and what made the Prophet ﷺ who he was, right? If we say that a Muslim is one from whom other people are safe from their hand and their tongue, and a mu'min is one from whom other people's lives and wealth are safe, what is a muhsin? What is a muhsin? Again, in practice. Right? A muhsin would be, kind of by extension, one from whom the entire existence is safe from them. Not only is it safe from them, it benefits from them. It is made better by virtue of coming into contact with them. That's who the Prophet ﷺ is. He is one from whom the entire existence is made better for coming into contact with him. Right? That's why the stump moans. That's why the lizard speaks. That's why the cloud follows him. Right? Because they see him because he sees them. That's what that is. They're like, oh, I know exactly who you are. Why? Because you know what I am. You know who I am. This definition takes into consideration that the world and humankind are not only material or physical in nature, but more fundamentally, they are also spiritual and have a higher metaphysical significance. They serve a cognitive and moral purpose that transcends their immediate physicality, sensuality, materiality, utility, and temporality. Namely, a purpose which is indicative of a higher, more encompassing reality with a capital R, right? The haq, from which they have originated, or which they are perpetually dependent, in which they are embedded, and to which they are responsive and ultimately accountable. We thus have here both an economy of the world and an economy of the soul, an economy of the worldly life and an economy of the afterlife, an economy of the material in the service of the economy of the spiritual. Right? We don't separate these things. Not in our worldview. These are not separate things. They are all connected. So the restoration of wealth, the term islah in the title of this piece, right? In the title of and also in the title of the classical text, Islah al-Mal, Restoration of Wealth by Ibn Abi Dunya, means reformation, rectification, reparation, rehabilitation, and restoration, which is to put right what is wrong, to remove evil deeds with good works, to replace ill being with well-being. It is to make wholesome, productive, meaningful, and purposive again what has been fragmented, corrupted, dissipated, and rendered meaningless and pointless. It is deliverance from error and return to guidance. It is to undergo the rites of atonement for the sin of excess. This restoration takes place firstly in the mind, by which the original true meaning and purpose of the socio-economic life is restored to the understanding and wrong notions of it dispelled. And secondly, in the actual activities of earning, of livelihood, and the provisioning of personal and communal needs, and the manner of their organization. Thereby, we realize our knowledge of what is real and true through the actions of doing what is right. Through this process of systematic recovery and restoration, wealth is rehabilitated to again perform its true, proper, and just function. One that is realigned to clear, objective, well-defined, ethical, moral purpose. Thus, the right livelihood economy is the economy of purpose. It is transcendentally axio-teleological. Right? It is meaning, axiology is the study of value, right? Valuation. Right? Teleology is the study of purpose. Right? So we now have an understanding of economy in terms of its true value and also its purpose. It's again as oriented and positioned within the Islamic worldview. Right. So it is transcendentally axio-teleological through and through, in which the material finds its meaning in the moral and the spiritual, and worldly life becomes the seedbed for the afterlife. Okay. Right. So that's a bit of a primer. That's an introduction to what would then lay the groundwork of this this broader discussion as it relates to, again, the Islamic gift economy. So I think we talked about possibly taking questions. How long? 8 more minutes. Okay. So in the second session, what I'd like to do is to have more of a discussion focused on what actually, again, constitutes the IGE or the IGE Pro. But I thought it was just really important for us to first lay a conceptual groundwork, right? But that, again, lay out this sort of cognitive map that properly positions the discussion so that the what we're to talk about later on makes some kind of sense. Because, as with many topics, I think probably especially with things like economics, like religion, and it's funny because for a lot of people, economics is akin to religion. A lot of the language is very loaded, and so it does take unpacking, and just be able. We would do well to again lay out the some definitions and assumptions, right? That would form the basis of the discussion. So again, I don't know if there were any, again, questions, comments, reflections. I think if there's been enough of a monologue, we have a few minutes to maybe take a couple of, points of reflection, critiques, whatever you have. I mean, that's one of the things we like to do at, IGE. We like to spar. It makes us sharper. Oh, okay. So it looks like we have. Tell you. Okay, great. Yes. I'm sorry. Was somebody? Yeah. Yeah, and just I'm kind of going through the going through some of the questions that are in the chat, and inevitably many of the questions, they often pertain to questions about whether the engagement or use of specific financial instruments, or accessing certain financial institutions is whether or not it's permissible. I'm not a faqih. That's not my area of expertise. But one of the things that Dr. Adi is often, he's got very strong opinions about is this descent into what he often calls fiqhism, right? Fiqhism, where there's this constant, questioning about whether this or that is, is it halal? Is this permissible? It's not permissible. And actually, Sean and I were just laughing yesterday about. So Sean's been kind of engaged with IGE for some time. We were laughing about it, an instance in which Dr. Adi had made a comment about, to kind of illustrate the problematic nature of the questioning. He says, I could ask, is it halal for me to say hi to the wall? Hi wall, hi wall, hi wall. Like what's the point? Like ultimately, what is the objective? Is it permissible for me to stand on one leg and hop in one place for the next 5 hours? Probably. It's probably not permissible. But ultimately, what is the goal? And I think, again, the reason why having this discussion about this cognitive framing of what we're talking about with as it applies to economy is trying to get people to think about the questions that they ask. Again, ultimately, what is the objective in engaging in any activity in this life? Where are you trying to get to? And I think that it was, very eloquently and clearly articulated, right? What the objective is in terms of this discussion as it pertains to economics, why it is that we are engaging in the activities that are encouraged, again, within what we would consider to be a purposive economy, is that you have to ask yourself, of these things that you are trying to access, again, within the current system and structure of economy and finance, what is the point? What is the objective? And I think part of the problem in asking the question is that you also have to recognize that to a certain extent, we are all captured within this system, and that you are dancing to somebody else's tune. And that is why it is very important for us to step back to assess what exactly is going on, right? So we can figure out where it is, how it is we need to, again, kind of reorient our where it is that we are trying to, again, get to. Sidi, I'm sorry.
Allah Allah. Bismillah. Thank you so much for that presentation. This is very profound and really requires a lot of thought. And inshallah, I hope that we can make this article available, what you're reading from, for everyone. So we'll find a way to send that out. I wanted to say to kind of put this all into perspective and why that we feel that the Islamic gift economy. Sorry, just a little bit of feedback. If you could just turn down it's supposed to be so that there we go. Just needs to go down a little. We're fine. To put this all into perspective, we're in the process of developing a program called the Prophetic Inheritance Program, and the three of the core components of that program. One are obviously the traditional sciences,
that you can't bypass that. You just have to study them. And the second is understanding other things that we need to know to contextualize those traditional sciences. And there's a long list of things there. But the third aspect of it is this idea of holistic living. And there are certain things that in traditional societies that were understood and that were lived that weren't necessarily formally studied in the madrasa. And now in a fragmented world like the one in which we live, there is a whole new series of challenges for us to really truly live in a prophetic manner according to the guidance of our Prophet ﷺ. We have to go out of our way, and it's an incredibly difficult uphill and upstream battle. And the idea of the Islamic gift economy fits squarely into this need. And this is challenging the very basis and foundation of the system, the economic system in which we live. And it's not going to be easy to even understand. As we can see, there's a lot of new terminology there, let alone to put into practice. But I think the main thing is that we all approach this is that the first step is knowledge. We have to understand this. And it's a blessing to have Sidi Rhamis, because he's also someone who is a trained permaculturalist, even though his degree was in engineering. So maybe this is just a different type of engineering, mashallah. And so for him to team up with Dr. Adi, who spent a lot of work doing this, this is a core component of prophetic living. And one of the things that we're attempting to do here at Al-Maqasid, and there's other people doing the same thing, is to bring together different aspects of prophetic living that you only tend to get in particular silos. This is why we have Hakim Salim Khan here and putting on programs in Islamic medicine. This is why that we want to expand to a number of other topics, because there's many other things that are under this broad rubric of prophetic living that, again, weren't necessarily taught in a madrasa. How to live, nutrition, sunnah sports, exercise, household management, economic, all of these things are essential. And the amazing thing about the Ihya is it's a platform in a way of engaging these ideas, and by extension, the tradition, in a very, very real way. And that's really what we're interested in. So I just wanted to say that so we can kind of understand why something like this is so important. And the scholarship of Dr. Adi and the contributions from this is significant and substantial. And this is something that I'm hoping that we can move from just having weekend retreats about them, just speaking about it in a very basic way where you and I actually really seriously commit ourselves to these principles. The principles of Islamic medicine, the principles of Islamic economics, the principles of that Islamic living in all of its facets. And this to me is much more important than any conference quick appearance, much more important than any media appearance. Not that we don't need to be on those fronts, we do. But this is what's going to really root Islam in our hearts and help us transfer it to the next generation. And as Sidi Rhamis pointed to, is that really give da'wah to our people, where they see that this way is superior because we're living its realities. And so I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes we might get lost in trying to understand this in and of itself, let alone in where it fits. And may Allah Ta'ala reward Sidi Rhamis for his presentation. And I'm hoping that this will be the first step towards many future steps, inshallah, in really making this a reality, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, or at least die doing what we can.
Just one last point I wanted to make here, and this just came to mind actually as Sheikh Yahya was speaking. The questions about, for example, as was put forward in the chat about whether or not the use of certain, again, financial instruments was, is this permissible? Is this not permissible? What I'll say about this, the tendency to rely on these instruments is also indicative of the extent to which we don't have real communities. Because if we had real communities, the communities would be able to marshal the resources that are available within those communities to actually service the needs of its members, right, that are now relying on things like interest-laden credit, loans, right, credit cards, et cetera, right? If we had the types of institutions, the structures, right, if we had sort of the community protocols, if we had the science, if we apply the science of commitment, right, to each other. You know what the science of commitment, and actually this is again another great point that Dr. Adi often makes. You know what the science of commitment is? We have this science in Islam. You know what it's called? It's called a contract. It's the science of commitment. And they're talked about they're talked about book 13. There's six contractual forms that are talked about in that book that Imam Ghazali highlights. And that if we have real community, right, where we're engaging with each other outside of our gathering to observe certain, again, ritual observances, as it relates to, again, the practice of religion, then we would have a very different dynamic. And then I'll end on this, and this is actually a point that's made in the Ihya from actually a saying, a report that actually comes from, it was reported about Sayyidina Umar, is that you actually don't learn anything about people by watching how they practice religion. And I see you nodding your head, Sidi. You don't learn anything about them. None of the things that you need to know about them in terms of what are the things that would allow for you to create the basis for creating a community that actually works and functions. So I'll end it there. And what time are we? I'm sorry. What time are we ending? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My bad. Please. And then actually, some of the sisters they had their hands up as well. So I want to make sure we don't forget them. Go ahead, Sidi.
Barakallahu feek. Sidi Rhamis, mashallah, jazakallah khair. That was a beautiful presentation and very important. And I just wanted to kind of tie a couple threads together because we had the presentation by Ustad Yusuf before that, and we talk about insurance. Mm-hmm. And as somebody myself who is has a little bit of training in the fiqh side of things, just like you're dealing with the questions, we're often everybody's always sort of concerned about, well, what's the ruling on this commodity, right? And no one's talking about, well, what's the theory of commodification? Aywa, right? So it's really, really an important thing to take a step back and to unite the two, right? Because, you get lost in the weeds, this type of insurance, that type of insurance, that type of insurance, without looking at the structure of the system. If the Amish lose a barn, they get together and they all put a barn up.
And I have to thank you for mentioning the Amish, because a community that we constantly are referring to in the class are the Amish. And you live right here in the center of that community. They really are quite remarkable, in terms of being able to see a community of people, a religious community of people that have not compromised, right, on the things that make them who they are, right? And people respect them for that. So thank you for mentioning that.
It's really important because it takes us from going to being reactive, where, and much of Islamic finance, unfortunately, is extremely reactive. We just wait for every conventional financial instrument to exist, and then how do we Islamify it, quote unquote, Islamify it, or what's the ruling on it, without looking at what should we be doing as an ummah to get ahead of the curve, exactly what you said, to put our communities in position where we're fulfilling the need that these financial instruments are providing, but we're not doing it in an exploitative way. And that's exactly what you're talking about, and it's a beautiful thing. So may Allah reward you. Barakallahu feekum.
I think the sisters are.
Sorry, sister. We'll get you in a second. MashaAllah. That Imam Tom, sorry, sisters, just wanted to officially welcome our dear Imam Tom. That I'm going to pronounce your. What's the? I've heard people pronounce your last name differently. Fakin. Okay. All right. Fakina, mashallah, he's one of the teachers of my sons, but also Yani. a teacher of many people and works with Sheikh Omar Suleiman at Yaqeen Institute, and we're very blessed to have him here and to benefit from him. We're looking forward also to him sharing in the interactive session and inshallah closing session, inshallah ta'ala. So ahlan wa sahlan and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I just introduced myself. I'm new here. This is my second time attending anything here, and from New York, and I haven't seen anything as kind of stimulating in the massages over there. So I just want to thank everyone who put this together. Thank you very much. So I'm very interested in this topic, and my first introduction to the Islamic economic system was by reading Sayyid Qutb's book, Social Justice in Islam. And I know, he's a bit controversial, and the later parts of his books kind of introduce political systems and ways of implementing the Sharia, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. But at the beginning of his book, the first three chapters kind of outline what it seems to me what you've been kind of talking about. I just want to know, are there any maybe points of differences that you would say are important to know in comparison, like his idea of social justice and the fact that Tawheed is the foundation of economic system? Are there, how you've presented your ideas today, do you think that they're similar to his in his first three chapters, or would you say that it's a bit different? Because that's the only knowledge I have of the Islamic economic system. I just want to know, to what extent should I kind of rely on what I've read and what I understood from his book, or should I read other books about it?
I'll say very briefly and quickly, you should read other books.
Okay. Okay.
I'll leave it at that. And it's funny you mentioned him, because like literally, I was actually, Sean and I were in the car last night. I was getting dropped off, and we were just talking about him last night. It just came up. One of the books I just mentioned, actually a very good book you should try reading, is actually The Impossible State by Dr. Wael Halak.
Read that one, actually.
And he actually has a section in that book,
yes,
talking about.
I took his class.
He's brilliant.
Yes,
I think he's really.
Yeah, I didn't know whether I should trust the information I read from his book or not. But I mean, and I would dare say that there are other people in the room here that could also speak to specifically, Sayyid Qutb and some of the other sort of modernist kind of reformist thinkers that they're problematic, right?
On a number of levels, and I think in part because the as we were talking about earlier, it's the framework within which a lot of their writing takes place. I mean, it's very much. I mean, these are people who are very much influenced by their experience, like their colonial and post-colonial experience.
Right.
Right. So it's very much oriented within this crucible. It's kind of formed within this crucible of a very contentious kind of political milieu, and they're not looking at it necessarily from, I think, the same sort of metaphysical, position.
Yeah.
Right, or orientation. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of somewhat got the opposite. For example, when he's comparing it to the social sciences, like social liberalism, you kind of see that he's critiquing that the moral system, the modern moral system. Is he doing that, or do you think that maybe he's absorbed it more than critique?
Yeah, again, I think probably if you read people that are a lot more familiar with the critiquing his thought, they would probably, you'd find that they're pointing out he has been absorbed into this sort of first and foremost this political orientation.
Yeah.
Right. It's very much looking at the world through the lens of politics.
Definitely.
And I think what we were pointing out here is that, of course, it's not to say that politics are not important or relevant, but what is the root what is the root of where, again, politics comes from? Where is it rooted? What is it rooted in? So going back to what was mentioned before about this, again, ethical fractal, it begins with this discussion about ethics, right? Management of the self, right? Management of the self to ecology, study of the household, economy, management of the household, to eventually politics, which is the management of the civic household. But it all comes from this being rooted in this concern about the management of the self. And that is entirely, entirely based in this understanding of the human being as it is explained within, again, the Islamic kind of worldview, again, in the metaphysical sense.
Right. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you all so much. It's beautiful to see this degree of engagement. It is a vast topic, many abstract ideas and new ideas, but it's beautiful to see it being brought home. And alhamdulillah, we'll have another opportunity to interact with Sidi Rhamis after lunch, inshallah, for session 2 of the Islamic gift economy. And it's of my poor adab and my mistake that I didn't provide a proper introduction, but inshallah we'll do that afterwards. I do think, though, that his presentation speaks for itself in terms of his expertise, but we'll give you some of the formalities as far as his background, inshallah. So at this time, we'll take a break that extends until 3 p.m. Within that break, we'd like to first invite you all to have lunch. So the lunch will be held in the Green Barn. Brothers and sisters will have separate entrances. At 2 p.m. will be the iqama of Salat al-Dhuhr. So whatever you need to accomplish before 2 p.m., whether it's taking a brief rest after lunch, freshening up, renewing your wudu, praying your sunan, iqama will be at 2 p.m. After 2 p.m., there will be additional time for break until the next session, the Islamic Gift Economy Part 2, starts at 3. So you have from now until 3, with Dhuhr being centrally there at 2 p.m. So please be sure, if you can, to arrive back at your seats by 2:50 or 2:55, just out of, again, adab and in the interest of starting on time, to give us as much of an opportunity to interact with and digest and have further discourse on this really interesting and relevant topic, as we can see. And the relevance, of course, is immediate because we all interact in this system. We're really entrapped within it, even if you want to use that word. But it also speaks to the relevance of the ihya and the beautiful, of course, universal truth and relevance within the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the revelation that we've been given to navigate all times and all places, including these and future ones. So with that in mind, let's take a break, inshallah. Have some time together, and as Sheikh Yahya mentioned yesterday, please feel free to mix amongst each other, learn new people's names and backgrounds and stories, and develop that ukhuwa that brings us one step closer to building true community. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.